Hello, and welcome to Felt Matters, a brand new podcast on all things felting, brought to you by the education team of the International Feltmakers Association. And we're your hosts, and both keen feltmakers. I'm Vivienne Morpeth, coming to you from sunny Lincolnshire in England.
And I'm Heather Potton in the lovely city of Edinburgh in Scotland. So here we are in episode 3 already, Vivienne, and it's really nice to see you again this morning.
Oh, it's so nice. And we're here on a Sunday morning.
I know.
Chatting together in our virtual studio, Heather.
Yes, that's dedication, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. And, you know, at the beginning of this second season, in the episode 1, you very kindly allowed me to talk about my treatment for my ongoing blood cancer treatment.
Yeah.
And, you know, that led us to thinking about wellness. And it's really exciting that we've got somebody here this morning in this episode talking about wellness as well.
I think a thread that runs through the entire podcast is how feltmaking makes us feel. And we're just carrying on in that same vein for this episode.
So we're talking about well-being. So what's the connection with this first interview with Mary Break?
Well, she talks about sometimes when she's had a difficult conversation, her need to get into the studio and to just work with wool. So presumably
it's the activeness and it's the focus, like you're saying.
Yes, it's changing. It's taking your mind off whatever has upset you and transferring that into using your hands. And so try to filter out all the multiple input, whether it be from your memory or from your anxiety or just, you know, when you get an earworm of a piece of music that goes on, just try and filter all of those things out until you're just got one thing in your mind.
And I think that's possible with felt making because you're physically doing it and you can use an unconscious flow, like a subconscious flow of energy to work with the colors. Working with wool is also being a primary source material. It works on our etheric being rather than on many different levels. So it doesn't necessarily work as we're just teasing out the wool on our intellect. It's a very gentle motion, which makes it very cathartic for many people, but very engaging as well. So we can shut everything else out through doing that.
We've talked about felt making a lot together. Some of our conversations are in the podcast, but other parts, you know, didn't make the cut. But we have, you know, we have talked about the fact that there are different stages within creating something in felt. Some of it we have to be very, very present because we're working things out and we're thinking about them and we're looking at consequences. And there's other parts which are just repetitive. And then at that point, for example, the rolling, some people count. Some people can't count because they lose track because they're thinking about something else and that intrudes and stops them from counting. So then
some people sing, don't they?
Some people sing, some people listen to a piece of music that's a certain length, some people set an alarm. And I tend to count, I try to. So I think that's the whole kind of thing about wellness is that, you know, if you're having a tough day and you want to do and you do some felt making, that might be tough, but it'll be in a productive way because you're going to make something.
I think it distracts the brain and it rests all that brain energy.
Yeah. So I think that's what this episode is all about. We start off with Mary and Louise, who are in Hungary on the tour that we were talking about. And so Louise and Mary have met in a very special way because they've met through their passion. All they're expecting from each other when they first meet is that they love felt making.
Absolutely.
And that's why they've gone on the trip. And so all the chats and discussions that Louise had with Mary in this case, with Jackie in the previous episode, and later on in this same episode, we've got Ellen as well. They all know that they share something from the get-go.
And they've all travelled as well, which means that they're all focused. They're not with their own world. So Mary Break's from Tasmania.
That's right. Yes. And Ellen is from the States. And then in the middle of the episode, we have Niamh, who is my student, and we'll learn more about her later.
We're going to listen to Mary Brake now.
That's right.
In our chats that we've been having, you and I have had several conversations about different ways that people use felt making for well-being. And I know that it's something that's very close to your heart. So I'd like you to tell me a little bit about how you see making felt as a significant part of keeping well.
I think it's a really interesting concept, using felt to keep well. And I didn't realise this for many, many years until I was driving home. I'd actually been to a session with a psychologist, and we'd had some tough conversations. And as I was driving home, I just had this yearning to get into my studio and to soothe some wool with warm soapy water. And I realised that in this gentle manipulation of fibres, working with beautiful colours and fibres and creating something beautiful through that whole physical, touching, gently massaging process, that I was actually gently soothing, massaging myself.
Yeah.
And once I realised, I sort of started building in time for it. If I knew I'd got a difficult conversation to have, or there was something that was going to be a bit tough to do, that I would make sure I built in time in my studio to go and have this little therapeutic approach.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another aspect of well-being to this that is a little bit of different dimension, and that is the way felting can bring community together and can also act as a very unifying, positive expression of being together. And just one example of this was when my daughter got pregnant, and she was having a baby shower, and we were trying to think, what can we do for her?
Yeah.
And so I decided that we would make a family rug for the baby. And this involved my husband, who, he's not into felting and playing with fibres at all.
Yeah.
It involved her brother, who's a scientist and also isn't involved in this. It involved the young, my two grandchildren, aged 4 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did was I laid out a base layer for a baby blanket, and I made some pre-felts in different colours. And everybody was invited to come down to the studio. We had a set time. And my daughter knew nothing about this, but everybody accepted the invitation and came. So that was a real win, that everybody came to be together on this project. But then the actual project itself, one of the grandchildren drew around her hand and cut that out, which was a bit hit and miss, but that's part of the story.
Exactly.
The youngest one drew what she told me was a crazy elephant, and I couldn't quite work out an elephant anywhere in the shape, but that's part of the story.
Yeah.
Her brother did a bottle of wine, cut out a bottle of wine because she'd not had any alcohol while she was pregnant. And everyone laid out their piece where they wanted it to be. And then the two granddaughters got the Bowsers and were spraying water. They thought it was the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And then my husband did a cricket bat and ball because we knew it was going to be a boy.
Right.
And then I had everybody's hands on that rug, gently rubbing it and felting it together. And I just thought I couldn't have thought of a better gift for her. But it was also a gift for all of us because it was such a unifying thing to do.
Yes, how wonderful.
And I think, felting's so accessible to everybody, isn't it? You can't actually get it wrong.
No, you can't. And the shapes that they cut out and put on that blanket are there to tell the story forever then, aren't they? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I reckon that baby will have it for his children down years to come.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, that's just wonderful. Really wonderful. $64 million question. Have any of those family members been back in your studio making felt since?
Yes, they have. My granddaughter has actually decided that with Nanny Mary, she does craft.
Right.
And so we have Secret Santa, and at Christmas time, she bought for me. And she was all excited for me to open my present that she bought me.
Yeah.
And her mum had taken her to a craft shop, and she'd chosen a needle felting koala for herself because she
Right.
loves koalas,
Yeah.
and a needle felting penguin for me because I love penguins. And she said, "So I've given you a present that we can do together."
Oh, how
So
wonderful.
I thought that was so cute that
Yeah.
there was a present for her in there too,
Yeah.
wasn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. She's a
and
clever girl.
Yes. And I'd never done needle felting, but
Right.
it introduced me to it because I had to teach her, and we made these little creatures together, and
Yeah.
it was really fun.
Brilliant.
She's been in my studio quite a few times since.
Fabulous. So that's a whole new generation of felt makers that you're
That's
bringing up.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what I sometimes think we're on this planet to do. Spread the word.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just facilitates such a lovely interactive time
Mm.
between someone in their 60s and someone who's 6 years old, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And much better than sitting with the 6-year-old on your knee watching TV or playing on an iPad.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How wonderful.
Hmm.
Mary, it's been lovely sitting here and chatting to you. And I can see the kettle out of the corner of my eye. So I think now it's probably time for a very British and very Tasmanian cup of tea.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks for having me and for the chat.
Thank you very much.
As she said, I am sure that Mary's grandson will always treasure the blanket that his family made for him. What a super idea. And isn't it great how her granddaughter bought them both a Secret Santa gift so that they could create their little needle-felted animals together? I first met our next guest, Niamh Britton, when she approached me to teach her about felt making. One of the first things she told me was that she's autistic and has 3 autistic children. Through our sessions, I began to understand just a little bit about autism. However, it wasn't until I watched a series on the BBC called Inside Our Autistic Minds, presented by the naturalist Chris Packham, who himself has Asperger's, that I began to understand a little better. In the documentary, Chris helps each of 4 autistic people make a 2-minute film that encapsulates their inner life. The film that resonated the most and reminded me of Niamh herself was about Flo, an improv stand-up comedian who, when not on stage, uses masking to help her cope with work and social situations. The programmes gave me a far greater insight into autism, and bit by bit I discovered more about Niamh's own inner life and her autistic mind. For this next interview, I invited Niamh to my studio so we could felt and chat together, as you'll be able to tell as our conversation meanders onto the woolly side. So I was trying to remember when you first started felting, because you started with needle felting on your own, didn't you?
Yeah.
And what attracted you to it in the first place?
It must have been something on social media.
Right.
It must have been, yeah.
Not live, though, not sort of an actual piece.
No, I didn't see an actual piece.
No?
And then, I troll craft shops and craft supplies.
You mean troll as in TRAWL, not
Yes.
TROL? Yeah. Yes, you see.
And craft itself is a hobby, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Where you're sort of open to whatever
Yes.
there might be. And I'm interested in how people make things.
Yes.
And I remember I was really, really, really passionately into pottery,
Yeah.
sculpture, ceramics, and I'd been working a lot hand building and things, and I decided that I needed to use all my life savings to buy a kiln.
Really? I didn't know that. When was this?
It was really not that long before I started felting.
So you have a kiln?
No. So I have an uncle,
Oh, right.
an artist,
Okay.
and obviously has lots of art friends and went through
Mhm.
university. And he said, "You're mad."
Ah.
I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, what else have you experimented with sculpting with?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Oh, nothing." And he said, "So you've just gone straight for the one thing, to be the extortionate setup. You'll need an electrician to come in and rewire your house."
You probably have to get your house fireproof.
Yes, all kinds of, lose a room of the house. Anyway, I was very grumpy about what he'd said.
But he was
But
right.
I chewed over the
Yes.
sense of it, and I thought about working with paper, and I looked at videos of how people made things with paper, and then I happened to find myself in hobbycraft looking at wool for knitting with for another project, and then they have these needle felting kits,
All right. Yeah.
and I thought, "Oh, that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I want to try this."
Mm-hmm. So that was your first thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I hate recipes. I hate patterns. I hate rules. I hate instruction.
What a rebel.
I know.
That's why you didn't become a teacher like me.
So
Yes.
I bought a kit and I followed none of the instructions, and I made something completely different with it, and it was really good.
Mm-hmm.
I made this lovely little dragon.
Oh.
It was a gorgeous little thing. And actually, I'm really, really proud of it, because I think for a first needle felted...
So what had you got then from the instructions? You must have got something.
Oh no, I didn't take anything from the instructions. I think I must have watched a video on YouTube or something like
So
that.
when you were doing this dragon, did you start with like the body and the head and then stick them together, or did it just grow?
So I started with the body and the head and the limbs and the wings.
Okay, so you kind of had seen then that it was done in sections rather than just lumping it all, or is that just your common sense?
And I remember one thing I took from however I got these instructions, my memory's awful, was that you had to make a really solid core. And then I realised one of the things I love making with ceramics.
So you did work with ceramics, you just didn't buy the kiln.
Yeah, no, I was obsessed with making little seed pods and bowls and things like that. It was wonderful. I love it.
So was that kind of just building the clay rather than...
Yeah, I did also use the wheel, but I didn't get the same pleasure from the wheel as... There's something about playing with something with your hands where you look down one moment
Mm-hmm.
and you've got a lump of something, and then you get lost, and suddenly you tune in and you pay attention to it.
Yes.
And there's a thing.
Well, I think that's what
in your hand.
that's what
It's
attracts
just-
that's what attracts people to felt making, isn't
Yeah,
it? Because
exactly.
you
It's
just
exactly the same joy that
Yeah,
I got from
yes.
ceramics.
So that was the dragon,
Yeah, that was the dragon, and then I started making bowls.
right?
And I think I brought my bowls to you.
And they were needle felted.
Heard of
Yes.
this
Wow.
idea that you could, and you couldn't quite grasp that I'd stabbed these vessels.
Well, I mean, yeah.
And I'd had to problem solve because I couldn't figure out how I could get something flat. So I remember you took some
you said-
fabric and I filled it with dried rice.
You said, hang on.
Yeah.
You just said how you get something flat, but then your hands were doing this.
Yeah, sorry.
You mean something curved,
Flat. How
three-dimensional?
to basically solid felt
Yes.
something by needle felting it. It's hollow. How to make something hollow.
Yes. Right. Okay. Got it. Yes, because obviously you'd been working on the precept of making something solid in the center, and now you wanted the reverse.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I was trying to think, well, how do people make these things? And I hadn't heard of wet felting.
That's funny because if you did so much trawling, I'm surprised you
know.
hadn't come across it. But
No.
anyway,
So
yeah.
here I am thinking there must be a way to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then do you know when people use some foam off it or a brush as a base to flat needle felt?
Yes.
So I thought, well, if I get a piece of fabric and I fill it with something like, what I ended up using was rice.
Yeah.
Just uncooked dry rice.
Yeah.
And then I just put an elastic band around it to make it into a ball at the top.
So you needle felted around the form?
Needle felted around the form. And I kept pulling it off. So that I could stop it from becoming one with the form.
I now can't visualize those balls, which is a shame because I remember you did bring them to me, but
they're nice.
Yeah, of course. I think that I think is one of the things that's always impressed me is that pretty much everything you make is good. You work. You're one of the people that picks up the instructions and really. I mean, that's the interesting thing. You say you don't follow instructions,
I find that really strange to hear because I feel so.
But when you work with me, you do what I tell you to.
Right, okay.
And you also watch me. Cause
I know I watch you. I watch your hands very carefully.
And that's why you're good.
I don't think I pick up verbal instructions very well. And I think part of the problem is a lot of the time I process language quite slowly. And so I have to work on this process that I'm going, yes, when I have no idea what you've just said because it will ruin the conversation and flow of what you're saying. And then I'll catch up. But there's a delay in the time it takes me to process. Do you see? So I think often I miss a lot. For me, it's really important watching your fingers and your hands and how they're moving and how they're... my brain is much more in tune with what's going on with your fingers.
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, than anything you're saying.
Fair comment. That is
and I'm sort of in my head
doing it.
I'm doing it.
So, why do you think you're not felting at the moment?
A couple of reasons. It's very hard at the moment to get time where I know I will have a chunk of time and I won't be interrupted.
And does it matter if you're interrupted?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does because there are steps that I need to do in sequence. The other thing is that painting, it doesn't matter if I'm interrupted, so I'm painting a lot, but therefore I've got painting mess all over my felting table. So yeah, I need to clear up some space.
One of the things I've noticed about you and felting is how you respond to things that you like. You get very, very enthusiastic in a way that a lot of people don't.
No, I don't think they do. I don't think.
And I like
people
that.
have the same experience. But some people do. I recognize it in other people, but yeah.
But
get very fired up.
And how does that feel?
Feels like a real high, sort of a euphoric feeling, where I want to learn everything I can and soak up everything I can about the experience. I want to capture the feelings and the sensations and the smells and the words.
But you're not so keen on the written word, are you? Or are you?
I am, and it's a problem. It's why I avoid the written word, actually.
Why?
So, if I read a book, I'm not aware that I'm reading the book. I am there. I'm completely absorbed and I can't stop until it's done, until I'm finished. And I will not eat, I will not sleep, I will not do anything until I've devoured it. And like I say, I'm not reading the words. I'm not aware of reading the words. I'm just aware of the whole world.
And does it matter how well written that book is? I presume it does.
So I either can't read it.
At all.
Yeah. Or I'm completely hooked. There's no in between. And I think that one of the other things is that I am not very good at in between.
And is that sort of just a symptom of autism, do you think?
Actually, so I'm learning more and more about ADHD, which actually goes alongside autism really often, which is unfortunate because they make really, really poor bedfellows.
So how do they overlap or do they not overlap?
So the difficulty, to oversimplify, is that autism needs repetition, routine, predictability.
Yeah.
ADHD needs novelty.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And is repulsed by the thought of repetition or at complete odds with each other. Yeah. It's so funny. So my youngest has ADHD, and it's what we all grew up knowing about ADHD.
Him.
Yes.
Right.
Fidgeting, diving around. He just looks hyperactive.
Sort of kind of slightly manic.
Yeah. He's everywhere, everything everywhere all at once. And in learning about his diagnosis and going through that process, to all these tick boxes, and I realise, oh my God, this is me. So I've got a diagnosis of ADHD.
You have?
Yes.
Not autism?
Both.
Both?
Both.
That must be very conflicting.
And it's interesting because...
But you quite enjoy what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So this is very repetitive, but it's kind of in the zone.
Calming.
Yes, because I mean, your hands are working and your brain's doing something else. Yeah. And you can change hands, by the way. Although even though I'm left-handed, I tend to use my right hand. Yes, sorry, carry on. I mean, I'm not sure about me, but I find it quite hard I'm very good with routine in some ways, but then I will, if I'm tidying the house, which doesn't happen very often, I'm all over. I don't sort of stick to one task and do it and finish it. I'll be over here, and then I come back and think, oh, you've only done one of those. Okay. And I don't know if that's an element of it.
Yeah.
But then does that mean everybody's got an element of ADHD? And I mean, it's just I
guess everybody has habits. Everybody has the personality traits. I think when you're looking at a diagnosis of something like that, you're looking at something, and I know people hate to use the word pathology around autism and ADHD, but you'd only want to be using those terms to describe a pathology, wouldn't you? Because otherwise they're not useful. They're not.
So what do you mean by a pathology? Because I'm not scientific.
Something that's having an impact on your ability to get by and live your life.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, ADHD, what does the pathology of ADHD look like? It's that I can't remember where my things are. I leave a trail of destruction behind me. You can tell where I've been because it's like following breadcrumbs, you know? It's the inability to read the recipe.
When you say destruction, what exactly are you?
I don't really mean.
I know, but what?
I really just mean that I've left
stuff that you've like picked it up and not finished, or
or literally, I'll try and leave your house without my glasses, without my jumper, without my bag, without my keys.
Yeah. And do you have kind of methods of counteracting that? Or do you just leave things at other people's houses all the time?
People's houses all the time. Yeah. I find it very hard to sequence things. So there's a job that needs to be done, and I can think it's like all of it is there at once.
Okay, so you can't unpick it.
The order very easily.
That's interesting.
And it's like my body wants to do it all at once. Maybe it's an impatience.
I know, I've got a bit of that. But well, this is actually a perfect example. So I had looked through the materials list and I thought, oh, I've got all that. Mm-hmm. It'll be in my stash. And then on the day of it, I thought, okay, I don't have that. I don't have that. I don't have that. Yeah. So since I started this, I have had to order some organza and get it delivered, which came yesterday. I realized I didn't have any black. I thought I did. So I got my friend Louise to send me some. So that arrived yesterday as well. So it's those. Yes, you got it?
Yes.
And yes. Yeah, I'm the same in the respect that if I don't have what I need...
I feel like you're the same in that you get it, but you're not the same in that you manage it. And I think that's where
there's
we're talking
the
about the pathology.
Right, okay. So can you cope with it? Can you go back to the basics and move
Or
forward.
are you then huddled in a corner, literally crying
Yeah.
because the steps became too overwhelming?
You know, that is why, I think that's why if you go to a workshop and your tutor hasn't done that work for you, because that's what your good tutor does that for you.
Yeah, no,
They go back to the very
and I
beginning.
think that's really important for me to learn something. You're right.
So they say to you, so I know, for example, that if I take you through to my stash, small as it is, and ask you to pick out 2 or 3 colours, you can't do it. So then I'll do it for you.
Yeah.
And you're generally quite happy.
You're really good at removing the overwhelm. Do you know? And then I can focus on the different parts.
Yes. So that's why
And gradually those parts will come together to form something coherent that I can then take away and do really creative things, because I've got all these different components, and that's how I can cook.
Right. And what you need
without
then,
following recipes.
a good collaboration is when you have different skills,
Yeah.
not the exact same
No,
skills.
you're absolutely right.
And you know, I've realized that my strength is probably the boring stuff in the background, like proofreading or, you know,
I think you're really underselling yourself. That's certainly one of your strengths.
but you know, when it comes to felt making,
You've got an incredible eye for detail and an understanding of how little subtle details can make the difference between something coming together and singing and something just kind of looking.
Well,
I mean, the thing is, when I come in and I'm looking and I'm seeing your outfit, do you know? And it's so exciting and beautiful and creative, because you've seen how each these tiny little added details would go together. If I tried to do that, I wouldn't understand where to stop. I would just keep throwing and going, oh, I like this and that and there. Whereas you understand subtlety.
Oh, I'm getting embarrassed now.
You know,
well,
finesse.
thank you.
There you go, finesse.
Finesse,
That's what you're good at.
a wee bit. And I suppose, yes, I am a nitpicker for detail. And if I see something that goes out to press or something and there's a slight mistake, it bothers me. But I think, you know,
I think I'm very slapdash.
I don't think I'm the creative artist, though. I'm quite good at the technical. So if I want to teach a workshop, I don't have a distinctive Heather Potton style of felt making, and I can say this is the technique that I developed and nobody else, and so on. But I'm good at instructing and helping people with the process. Okay. I think that's probably where my strength lies, which makes it difficult to sell workshops, because I don't have...
Okay, I see what you're saying.
You know, I don't have... You know, the Fiona Duthie style is really distinctive and everybody knows it. Mandy Nash is another one who's a great, you know, and she comes up with new ideas and ways of doing things. Yeah. And I'm not very good at that. But I can do a technique I'm taught well.
And understand what the bones of it and why it works.
Yes.
And how to use it.
So maybe that's where my inspiration for just creating for the sake of it isn't there, unless I have a purpose, unless there's something I absolutely want to create, and then, you know, I can do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think felt making is different things to different people.
Yes, it is. Yes.
And I don't know for you if it's to do with what you create or to do with the process.
Both. Definitely both. I think it's definitely what I want to create, probably foremost.
It is, right?
I think so.
Mm-hmm. So if you're given a project, like you said, you've got this fox to do, that will spur you on to do something.
Oh yeah, but I probably won't do the fox. Do you know? What was the word you used earlier? Ornery. I really hope she'll be okay with the fact
that you're doing something,
that
but
the fox has become a wolf, or
a gannet.
Yeah.
Yes. And do you think that you can? That's another thing I find quite tricky, is representational. Tricky. Can you do representational things that look like what they're meant to look like?
So when I'm making something from needle felt, because I love making animals, actually, out of needle felt. I begin with my sketchbook.
Oh, excellent.
And I study the animal and the way it moves. I study its anatomy, its skeleton, and the muscles and how they're put together.
Really?
Yeah.
You do that?
Oh, I do.
Oh, excellent.
I draw endless pictures of the skeleton in different positions, and I'll do a rough outline. And even if you're doing something that isn't a real animal, you need to think about the biology of this imagined creature. Think about the physics.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it doesn't look like it's sitting properly on the ground. The weight will be wrong. How far over the figure is leaning. They'll be thinking very strongly, even in very crude cartoons, about how the weight travels through the body
and what's
realistic.
How to create motion.
Otherwise, you don't believe in what you're seeing. And there's the joy of something that isn't real, but that has reality. And that's the beauty of really talented. So I've got a passion for illustration and animation, actually.
Yes.
And I love learning about different people's styles.
Yeah, I think that's interesting then. So you are driven by the end product, and why wouldn't you do the fox, as that's what she's asked you to do?
So because I have to do it, and I think it limits my creativity. And I know people talk about limits are really important for creativity.
Well, but a lot of people find commissions hard.
Exactly, I find commissions horrible. You know, it sucks the joy.
Well, especially if somebody's very often asking you to do something you've already done.
Oh, that's awful.
So they say, oh, I really like that, because you did quite a few seascapes, didn't you?
I was about to say the exact thing. That's what everybody wanted.
Yes.
At the exhibition.
Yes.
This year.
And you thought,
everybody came
said,
and they
where are your seascapes?
And they kept looking at my paintings and going,
but they're not seascapes.
I really loved those felt.
And you haven't done one for a while?
I'd love to do one, actually, if nobody wanted one, because I'm really, really difficult.
Well,
I don't.
I think the only way to get around that, I think the only way to get around that then is to make for yourself first and foremost. You do what you like.
Yeah.
And then obviously you will know in your mind that people like seascapes, but you can do seascapes in so many different ways.
Yeah. This is fun.
I don't know if you've enjoyed talking.
Yeah. Love the sound of my own voice.
And that is going in. Anyway, I just wanted to say, thank you very much. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Good.
Oh, Heather, that was such a wonderful conversation that you had with Niamh.
Actually, I think one of the things that I enjoyed most about my conversation with Niamh was how much we laughed. She and I just, I don't know, it's really good when you get that kind of connection with somebody. And I do think that when you work well together, the laughter just comes. I mean, obviously, because when we're recording for this podcast, we have to cut out a lot of silliness.
We do. A lot of giggling that goes on, but it's a lot of real energy as well. And I think Niamh analyzes her work and her thoughts in a very clear and informative way.
Yes. I mean, I love the fact that when she bought her first ever needle felting kit, she then made something totally different.
Yes. I love that. I mean, you might think it's subversive, but it's actually showing a way of thinking about things.
Yes, absolutely. And that dragon really, really pleased her children. They loved what she had created. So yes. I think that was a lovely offshoot from her creativity.
And clearly she was already thinking beyond the end result of the kit.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there's an awful lot of us who will do a workshop because we think, okay, I'd quite like to make a robin or a scarf or a bag, but aren't particularly bothered about the process. They just want to have the thing. Whereas Niamh is just the complete opposite. She just needs to delve into the process and work things out for herself.
I think she has an inner vision as well that seems to come
Definitely.
through.
Definitely.
Yes. And I mean, diving in and working things out for yourself, I think, leads us really interestingly on to Ellen Silberlicht, because she's talking about volunteering.
Mhm.
And when we earlier in this episode, we were also talking about mindfulness and wellness and well-being, all of these interconnected words. And I was reading about the 5 pillars of wellness that the World Health Authority list, and of course these are already 2 of them.
Yes.
2 out of 5. That's pretty high going,
Yeah.
and I think felt making really fulfills probably all of them. Because volunteering is that sense of giving, isn't it? You were telling us about the involvement you were having in a project. It would be great to hear a bit more about that, Heather.
Well, yes, I think I mentioned that the project was to do with a collaboration between the Scottish Chamber Orchestra and a local arts group. It's a 5-year residency that the Chamber Orchestra are doing, and they do a 6-week project twice a year. And it's completely free. I don't have to pay to go to it. And you get a free lunch, which,
Oh, lovely. Free lunch. But I heard there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Well, it's interesting. I offered to do some felt making with the group, and they seemed quite keen. And the organizers seemed less keen, and I wasn't quite sure why. But anyway, I brought along some of my stuff and I showed them what I could do, and I discussed it with them, and they said our hesitancy is because we can't afford to pay you.
Ah, really? Yes.
And I said, well, that's fine. The amount that I have gleaned from this group, I mean, the first time that I did it, we sat in a circle, and the musicians were the Scottish Chamber Orchestra composer in residence and a wonderful saxophonist. And I sat at the end of the row, and I was sitting right next to the saxophonist as he showed us how he can create different effects with the saxophone. I read an article very recently about Kama Mutta. And Kama Mutta is a Sanskrit word, and it describes the feeling that you get when, for no obvious reason, you kind of well up and tears come into your eyes and you just feel really emotional.
Oh, yes. I think, yeah, we all have that, but I didn't realize it had a name.
It's called Kama Mutta. And when I sat next to this guy playing the saxophone and watching him, I just felt like I just couldn't stop crying, So we did this wonderful musical piece with him, and then we were doing percussion. And the last incarnation, we had a double bass player and a cellist, and we did more percussion in a different way. We all stood up, and we were being recorded, and it was just amazing. So it's a no-brainer for me to say, yes, I'll teach some felt making, because I want to keep that group together. I want
Yes.
to continue to have that feeling.
And
And
to give others that feeling.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they're happy and I'm happy. And so, yes, I'll get some expenses paid, but it really isn't to do with the money at all. Is it?
That's so different, because my volunteering is very active. My volunteering is with a project called Living Later Life Well. And in actual fact, I play table tennis with people who are working for muscle memory. And that's so invigorating. 3 or 4 games of table tennis every week, and really nice conversations and a cup of tea, talking to these extraordinary local people where I live, and about their lives that they've lived and living. It's so, heartwarming doesn't do it justice. I come home and I'm buzzing. And, I think I've been active, I've been giving, I've been involved in the moment. And it's all of those things really coming together.
But speaking of volunteering, one of the conversations that Louise had with Ellen was about how she teaches men and women who are in prison.
It's a fascinating conversation. And I think she also talks about making slippers as well. And of course, that connects with and resonates with so much of what we're interested in. But but yes, the volunteering, it's absolutely fascinating.
Mm. So let's have a listen to what she has to say about it.
Ellen, you've told me while we've been chatting, while we've been here, that you do a very special thing on a Tuesday. Would you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, where I live, it's very rural. I love to teach and I love to share what I do. And I don't really have any opportunity to do that. Although the librarian contacted me it was around last Christmas. And she said, she messaged me on the internet, on Facebook. And she said, years ago, you had told me that you would love to do something like this. And she explained that I live in Wayne County, so the Wayne County Correctional Facility hasn't had anybody come in to do any kind of experiences with the prisoners. And she remembers me telling her that I would love to do something like that. So she would connect me with the warden or the guy in charge. Well, the guy in charge was actually a former pottery student of mine from school.
Oh, that's coincidence.
So I met with him. I went through and got all of my credentials that I needed to. And so every Tuesday that I'm home,
Mm-hmm.
and it works lovely because if I'm in Hungary,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. And that's okay. So every Tuesday that I'm home, I go to the Wayne County Correctional Facility.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt with the women in the morning for 2.5 hours and run home for lunch and return and felt with the men in the afternoon.
Wonderful.
So I love it. It feeds my soul and it also brings joy to them. And they're so appreciative of me coming in.
That's wonderful. So we all know that felt making is a fairly slow process, and 2.5 hours isn't an awful long time.
Yeah.
Are they quick learners? Do they work fast?
Well, there was one woman, and the clientele always changes, fortunately.
Yes.
Sometimes when someone returns, I'll read them, why in the world are you back? I never want to see you again. But
maybe they come back for the felt making classes.
I have to tell you, when I first started with the men, because I first did, I think, about 2 weeks with the women. When I first started with the men after that, there was this one guy who was just, he was a hoot. So he would come in. I did a journal cover with the women. Now, the women and the men are not allowed to see each other. They don't, can't talk to each other.
Yeah.
The men come in. And this guy says, hey, I want to make a journal cover. And I said, how do you know what we do? And he said, oh, I've got my own pipeline. So he was really great. And the guys, there are more guys than women at the facility.
Okay.
So I can only do 8 people because that's the size of the room.
Yes.
So 8 people at a time. So the guys, at the end of each session, I say, oh, so am I going to see you next week? And, they said, well, we have to be able to sign up and there's a lot of guys who want to come. And I said, well, stop telling them that you're having so much fun. And so he started saying, oh, yeah, she's very mean and she makes us work way too hard. So then they started joking another time about, that they're going to get out next week. And, if they get out next week, they're not going to be here when we make slippers. And it's like, Judge, thank you very much for letting me out. But could I stay another week? We're making slippers. So they're, that's bringing joy to them in many different ways.
Absolutely. And giving them a craft as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really lovely. Thank you, Ellen.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed talking to you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Ellen and Louise. That was really interesting. And we just hope that you've enjoyed our chat and our chats. And we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
It's been really lovely to meet you on a Sunday morning in our virtual studio, Heather, and to hear Mary and Niamh talk as well. And I'm sure it'll be inspirational for so many people and touch many people's thoughts in different ways.
Yeah, so just thank you, everybody, for listening to the podcast where felt matters. This podcast is brought to you by the education team of the International Feltmakers Association. Conceived, hosted and produced by Vivienne Morpeth and Heather Potton. Editing by Heather Potton. Music by Artie Williams. Graphics by Rafaela Morpeth.
If, like us, you'd like to hear more from our amazing felting community, subscribe at the end of this episode. It helps other creatives to find us, and each episode will drop into your podcast platform for you to enjoy.